So this would be number 13. 13, does 13 have any significance in the world?
None. It's like the only number. And have you ever, Eric, thought of how many numbers there are? Seriously, it doesn't stop. 13 is the only one that has no significance at all.
Oh, man. Well, we got to do something about that.
We'll try to, up our game a bit.
So I was at my alma mater today at University of Vermont. And my son Julian and I were walking around, and we were standing at one of the wonderful red stone buildings at the University of Vermont. And I stood outside, and I had this thought that this building we're standing at is sort of a temple to thought. If you're thinking in terms of like a temple, like a religious temple, a church, or whatever, in this, like a university's and a building like that is kind of a temple, is to the brain, right?
To the use of
to the use of the brain, and to thinking, and I just thought that was kind of, I don't know, that kind of struck me that's really what a university at its core, at its best is. And as I was remembering, I was recalling I was like, I had a professor there, Quixote professor, was an incredible guy. Got me so excited about literature.
Wow. Yeah.
I thought, and I guess, thinking of Take Me for a Ride, how we decided from the beginning we wanted to talk about books, and because books are such a temple, I guess, in our life, in both our lives, and anyways, just thinking about that I just had a great appreciation for my university and for those professors I remember who were like, this other one who was like, really got me excited about traveling to Spain. And I came back from Spain. I was like, oh my gosh, it was so incredible. And she was saying, wow, wonderful, fanning that flame, and how great, I don't know. I'm glad to be in that temple as much as it's, and I think we are in an age when that worshiping in that temple has been somewhat, put on notice. I think there's been some kind of belittling of using logic and thinking in some ways that
it's like a power struggle.
Right. Yeah. I guess that's always existed.
It's been there for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought we'd sort of gotten the upper hand, but I don't think that's the case.
Maybe it's just an eternal struggle. I mean,
between what is and what humans can imagine. Because we can imagine quite a bit. And if you say that which you're imagining is real, then, it's kind of hard to argue with someone like that. On the other hand, someone like that, I wouldn't want them building my airplanes.
Correct.
Because it would crash. It would never take off. So the reality people win on some level, but the fantasy people can sure, if they've got a good narrative, they can sure sucker you in.
Right, and I want temples. I mean, I was pointing out when we were going around Burlington, I was like, there's the Flynn Theater, which is a temple to something else, to the imagination, to, and we want there's a lot of temples, huh? There's a temple to the arts, there's a temple to learning, and there's a temple to religious thought, which I'm all for too, depending.
Oh, yeah.
So...
I think the two can coexist.
Exactly.
So I'm all for temples of religion. But I'm somebody who believes strongly in the separation of church and state. And I believe that the teachings of belief is fine for the interplay, but it shouldn't have to control the methods of scientific inquiry. Because what happens is then you enter a dark age, and very quickly the religions just become hierarchical structure of power.
And you can argue that...
Because people are greedy.
Yes. You can argue that the religion of science also sometimes gets greedy too, and believes that it has all the answers.
I believe in systems, cathedrals, or back to one of the schools I went to, University of Pittsburgh, which has a big tower that's called the Cathedral of Learning, as I recall. And those systems that have inherent in them the best systems of checks and balances are the ones I will sign up for.
Uh-huh. I think you can argue. I don't recall where I heard this, but regardless, I think you can argue that.
No, you can't.
That one reason science has gained such an upper hand in the world is because all of the temples that came, the temples of thought that came before said this is the answer, and then the next one said, oh well, this is the answer, and then they battled it out, and science showed up and said we could be wrong, but there, that thought that we could be wrong, but here's some ideas, but we could be wrong, and then science went on to kind of conquer the world for better and for worse. But this is arguable, but that's kind of
the scientific method.
Right.
Admits to not knowing,
right,
at times, and
right,
keeps refining. It's a very powerful method.
That's powerful.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and it's very interesting that you're not from Vermont, and yet you went to college up here, and yet Vermont's where I ended up, and I'm from New York City, so it's an interesting confluence of Vermont stuff, and it's very interesting that you got to have these memories earlier today walking around your alma mater. Did you see Bernie?
No.
He was the guy with the mittens.
I think it's really interesting that we've had all these talks about books and stories, right? What a wonderful thing. And I think we were both. You were saying, what if we talked about books in our lives? It's a little bit of a different direction to go with the books, because I have so many fond memories of books in my life, as I know you do.
Is there any books that you can recall that early on really influenced you in terms of who you are today?
We're actually, as we've been driving through Vermont, we've been listening to Stephen King's It. And so many books, boy. But listening to It is I learned early on when I was hardcore into Stephen King in high school, and he definitely taught me the value of telling stories. And I'm listening to it now, and it's like, whoa. Because I haven't listened. I read it, back in, it was high school. Listening to it now, and like, wow. That made a huge impression on me, all those stories. I read all the big Stephen King books. The Stand. I read the Stand by Me, which I was telling you about. The Body, his short stories. I read the Tommyknockers, and that stuff made a huge impression on me. Huge. I think reading those big Stephen King books opened my mind a lot to literature, and I think it took me later on into reading. It took me a long time in life to get to these, but to read War and Peace, to read Moby Dick, which probably is
that was by Stephen King, wasn't it? Stephen Herman
Stephen
King.
Melville.
That's fascinating how Stephen King led you to what some would refer to as more classic literature.
I think I didn't feel able to read those when I was in high school, or even post-college. I couldn't read War and Peace.
Was it intimidating?
Yeah. Okay. I'm not allowed to read that book. It's not at my. I'm not smart enough. Exactly. Yeah. I've talked about this earlier on the podcast. I never didn't feel able to or smart enough, and I think it was around, in the last 10 years that I was like, I want to read that book, and then I found a way, which I talked about earlier on another episode, of use the Cliff Notes or the Spark Notes. Use them for their real purpose rather than how I might have used them in high school, which
was to get through the exam.
Right. Read the book, and with each chapter, use the guide to make sure you understood, and then keep going. Yeah. And that's how I got through those books, and those were epic. So I have another book in mind, but I'll talk about it after you. So what about you?
So I'm thinking some of the earliest books that influenced me were, well, on my bookshelf when I was really young, there was this book called Tinkerbell. And it was about a man who sailed across the Atlantic, nonfiction, sailed across the Atlantic Ocean in a 13.5-foot boat that he called Tinkerbell.
Wow, I've never heard of that book. Wow.
He did it, of course, 13.5 feet is not very big. 13.5 foot, yes, 13.5.
Yes.
As I said, that number has no meaning whatsoever unless you happen to be sailing across the Atlantic Ocean in a bathtub. And he went from Falmouth, Massachusetts to Falmouth, England.
No.
And when he did this, he was like some guy from Ohio, like a newspaper man. And he learned to sail in the Great Lakes, I guess. And he missed his wife and he missed his family and he was all alone out there, and the psychology played upon him out with his big waves. And he started to envision that these pirates had kidnapped his wife. So he'd like go off course for days on end chasing them to rescue his wife, and then he'd snap out of it. It's like a type of psychosis where you're just not connected because the things in your normal world aren't there because you just have a lot of ocean. Wow. But he was like a sane guy. He wasn't an edgy, well, maybe a little edgy guy, but this book really sparked my imagination of what is possible, because I was this little Jewish kid in Long Island, on the shore, and here's this guy going off into the great waters, and I'm like, wow, those waters are enticing. And then other books, I was really attracted to the sea. I read another book when I was a little bit older that totally changed me, and it's by Rudyard Kipling. It's called Captain's Courageous. I think maybe someone made a movie out of it, which I'd never seen. And it's about this young, super spoiled kid whose parents are insanely rich. And they're like, Mr. Shane, and he built the railroads all across, that went out west. And he was like gazillion dollars. And this kid was spoiled silly and had, very little value of life because he had everything and he never had to work a day in his life. And he's just really super duper arrogant, and nobody really spent time with him and taught him values. And so his mother, the book starts off, his mom is taking him shopping in Europe on this big ocean liner. And he's like, couldn't care less. He's really disconnected. Wow. And it's the very beginning of the book, and he's like really arrogant, like showing everybody how cool he is. And the big storm comes up at sea in the Great Atlantic. And the boat is tossing and turning, and there's just sailors out there, and one sailor's up there on the deck, and he's up on deck and trying to act like a big guy. And he says to the one sailor, this German sailor, it's like, oh yeah, you're smoking a cigar, well, I could smoke that. And the German sailor like, what? Well, you shouldn't be up here, whatever. And anyway, the kid takes a cigar and he smokes it, and he gets really dizzy in his head, and he falls overboard into the Atlantic Ocean. And then he gets picked up, rescued by someone who's fishing from Gloucester, from this boat called the We're Here. And he's sort of like, he's pretty much unconscious at this point. It's like, he comes to and he says, I'm Harvey Shane, and my dad runs the railroads, and where's my pocket change? And and they're like, look, kid, you probably hit your head. And even if, he's saying, take me back to shore. You have no idea. My dad is worth $200 million. Something like that. And they said, look, even if you are Harvey Shane, and we don't think you are, we have families. We're poor people. We have to work for a living. And so, get to work. And there's my son. The captain said, there's my son, Dan. You go work with Dan, and we'll be here all summer. And that's all I'll say. It's just, he changed. I changed by reading it. And it's about working and valuing yourself and valuing work.
It's funny you talking about that made me think of a formative book. I think you might have read these as well as the Tripod series.
Oh heck yeah!
Right, the White Mountains.
Totally.
Right. So as a kid, I read that.
Science fiction.
Oh my god.
Oh my gosh.
My brother had it because he was in
dystopian.
Total.
I
right.
love
They
those.
cap people.
Yes.
They put the caps on them to control their thinking.
Wait. Is that true? I just realized because we just went through 4 years of. Right. Oh, never mind. Wait, that thought. Wait, sorry. Go on. No, don't go on. Yes.
But, my brother had those. I think they read those in school. What a great book to give kids in school. And so, but I just got it kind of secondhand. I picked it up and I'm reading these with no one to guide me with these or anything. I'm just reading these. And that was some formative stuff. To just that's something that can happen where people try to control what you think. I mean, I was in, 5th grade maybe reading those. And the adventure of them and the battle to defeat the tripods. And then I've read those with both my sons, when they were younger. I thought those were formative books, but
it's funny, I haven't thought of those in so long.
Right? Those were epic.
When I was in 7th grade, I tried to write a dystopian story. And I remember my teacher, Mrs. Jakes, really, really encouraged me. And I was making a planet and the people on it and all this conflict and stuff like that. And just that interaction, realizing that it wasn't very good, it didn't really go anywhere, but that was a really big step for me.
It's amazing.
What other books?
I was just thinking. Well, when I think back, I'm in my more adult life, of books that I think about or talk about or tell people about, because I love talking with people about books. I say, I read this, and keeping track of the books. I think that's a good habit. I've done it only recently. It's keep a Google Doc of the books I'm reading and keep track of all the books you're reading. I think it's a nice exercise. And I put it up on the fridge. I put a list of okay, these books, and anyone in the family wants to write the books they've been reading. And Julian totally into that. And he runs his books go off the page, and there's pride in that. I think that's wonderful. I know your kids are major readers, and Julian, it's just joyous. Of recent, I'd say in the past, 10, 15 years, A Fine Balance, which we've talked about. We talked about that. Yeah. The music of that one that I wrote. But A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mistry, definitely one of the best books I've ever read. And then I would have to say, a book that I never forgot was this book called, it's A History of the World in 6 Glasses. And that's one of those books, because I love reading history. And this guy wrote this book. I'm sorry, I don't know his name right now, but A History of the World in 6 Glasses, where he looked at history through the lens of the 6 great human drinks, which are
orange juice.
Perfect guess. 6 great human drinks created by humans are. Go ahead, try.
You're taking orange juice off the table.
Orange juice is a great drink, but
created by humans.
Yes.
A great drink.
Epic drinks that. So
not
anyone.
Water.
Water
is
it, right? Okay, so anyone,
nature.
Go ahead. Pause the podcast. Try to think of what are those 6 great drinks. So, beer. Well, I'll start with coffee and tea. Those are 2. Beer. Wine.
And more beer.
Spirits, meaning rum and whiskey.
Okay.
Right? And then the last one is Coca-Cola. which was, made in the 1800s, and which had a massive. So these are drinks that have massive impact on human development or human interaction.
Right.
And that's one of those books that I've thought about. I think about all the time.
Interesting.
Right? Wow. Think about coffee and its place at the Age of Enlightenment when, the Middle Ages and disease and mead and people are throwing trash out the window and stuff.
That's on a good day.
And then coffee shows up, and in the cafes in France, and people are drinking coffee now, and exchanging ideas, and oh my gosh, how about this? Let's go out and build that building. You write this story, and I'll do this. Build this bridge, and whatever.
They're all hyped on
right. They're all hyped on coffee and tea, and that for better and for worse. But that how those things influenced human development. I find it fascinating, right?
These books introduce these new paradigms,
right,
that we can apply,
right,
and then we have paradigms on paradigms, and just keep growing. I remember when I was 14 years old or so, I came upon some books about mysticism by Carlos Castaneda. Mm-hmm. Totally changed my life.
That took you for a ride, didn't it?
Talking about taking for a ride, and I just so much it so resonated with me. I so much wanted to find a mystical teacher in the desert who spoke in riddles and could do magical stuff and had a lot of down-to-earth wisdom. So it's kind of like a, Hispanic Obi-Wan Kenobi. And what could be better than that? And that's what these books were about.
I read one of those, I think. I loved it. I think I read only one, though.
Yeah. So those books totally changed my life and got me on a certain direction that I'm just now recovering from. But boy, did I get a lot of stories out of that.
Do you ever read Tom Robbins?
Yes.
Yeah, that made me think.
Woodpecker.
Correct. Yeah, and even cowgirls get the blues. Maybe his best one being Skinny Legs and All for me. Tom Robbins,
good
definitely
stuff.
Formative thinking stuff.
Yeah.
When I was traveling after college.
Sure. How about the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
I never read those.
Douglas Adams.
Never read that.
Brilliant.
I bet. I never read. My brother, funny. I think, read those. I never. Yeah. I never read, I'm sad to say, the Lord of the Rings. I know. I read The Hobbit, but I've never read the Lord of the Rings. I know that's
somebody told me that's fiction. I was always in the impression that this is out there, and I've been waiting for the wizard.
What's funny is having this conversation. There are so many books that I would love to say, oh my gosh, and this one, Yeah. And how many authors? I wish I could name all the authors, but
it's Watership Down.
The story of a woman who wrote a story of her experience in the Cultural Revolution in China. These books that I just never. And there was one that was not Wild Swans. It was. Anyways, it's this just spurring on all these thoughts on books that just really wowed me. I know we both read the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And that epic. Talk about epic, book that it's historically.
John Steinbeck.
I don't know what I read by John Steinbeck actually.
Travels with Charlie and Grapes of Wrath.
Ooh,
and oh my gosh, so many ways to Mark Twain and To Kill a Mockingbird. We were just talking about that. So many ways to learn about history and culture by, you could travel to some of these places, but you're not going to see all of the different perspectives that these writers are offering.
And how epic that all of these writers have read so many other authors and have inspired other authors and have distilled ideas from other authors they've read. And
Razor's Edge by Somerset Maugham. Wow.
I never read that.
Oh my gosh.
Amazing, huh?
The Tempest by William Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my favorite play. Oh my gosh. So my dad was reading this book by John Krakauer many years back, and he said, "Hey, Dad, what are you reading there?" And he said, "It's called Into Thin Air." And I said, "Could I check it out?" He said, "No, because if I lend this to you, you won't sleep tonight." I said, "Come on, Dad, just lend it to me." So I couldn't sleep that night. I just had to keep reading it. It was that good. Krakauer's a great writer.
Krakauer's amazing.
Yeah, really good. A great storyteller. Framed brilliantly.
Gosh,
so many influences. I'd like to read Dr. Seuss again, but I guess they're all been banned, right? Because they have chickens in them, so they had to. The chicken lobby. I don't know if you have chickens in the lobby of your building, but we have a chicken lobby here.
Yes.
And apparently they didn't want people of different feathers to... I guess they got some egg on their face. You ever read a book, dude, called Be Here Now?
No, I have not. I know. I saw a documentary about the guy that made that. What's his name? Ram Dass, right?
Baba Ram Dass. He was
Right.
he was like Tim Leary, another Harvard professor who got turned on to a certain type of mind-bending drug, and that book had a lot of influence on me. I think probably in a good way. I think it had a lot of beautiful stuff in it. It's very artistic. This Harvard professor, drop in, drop out, turn in, turn off, turn over, roll over.
There's a great documentary about him later in life. I don't remember what it's called, but
just that whole culture of Tim Leary and Ken
Yes.
Kesey, immediately my mind goes to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Sometimes a Great Notion, Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, which is the book. Have you read that book?
No.
Oh, dude.
I know.
The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test by Tom Wolfe is the book about the 60s. That is the book about the 60s and how the hippie movement started and what the heck happened to it.
Wow.
It's it. That's the book.
Do you know the year that was written?
Yes,
it
I do.
late 60s?
Yes, I do.
Yes.
I'm not going to share it with you. No, I'm sorry. I'm joking. I don't know when that book came out, but I would think it was it came out in the early 70s is my guess. He nailed it. He also wrote another great book, Tom Wolfe did, called The Right Stuff. Which now
I haven't read that either.
that movie was really good, but just in terms of books, oh my gosh.
I've read Tom Wolfe, some great Tom Wolfe. The Bonfire of the Vanities, and A Man in Full. Great read.
Great stuff.
Oh my gosh.
Creative nonfiction, yeah.
So good.
Tracy Kidder, great writer.
Uh-huh.
The Soul of a New Machine.
The Heart is a Lonely Hunter.
That one I'm not. Oh, I don't know that one.
Beautiful.
Really?
Yeah, beautiful story.
Heart is a wow.
The Heart is a Lonely Hunter.
Wow.
Just about a young, like a young woman, and it's funny because some books you don't have to remember exactly the plot, just where it took you, where you felt, what space it made you feel.
When you're reading a book that's really affecting you, does it get into your dreams? Do you dream bits of it?
Maybe.
I totally do.
Maybe. I read Heart is a Lonely Hunter. How you remember where you read a book?
Oh, yeah.
That's one thing. It's I read that when I was teaching at a charter school in D.C., and I would take the metro every day. And always kind of bracing myself because it was hard work.
Yeah.
And that book I read The Heart is a Lonely Hunter on the metro on my way to teach every day.
Wow.
And somehow it and then other books, I've talked about when we had the episode talking about the running and the what is that? The loneliness of the long distance runner. But how many books I read by listening, and I've read so many books by listening to them.
Right.
And that is I've just very, very, very powerful stuff. Listening to someone else read a book to me is just such a powerful
Special thing.
It's a very special. It's a different type of read. But
two authors that affected me quite a bit at a certain stage of my life were Paul Thoreau and Peter Matheson. Both travel types of guys, both good writers. Peter Matheson was a naturalist and kind of got to be a bit of a Zen master. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way. He kept it pure.
What was one of his?
The Snow Leopard.
Oh, Snow Leopard, right. I've not read. Yeah.
There's a lot of wisdom to that book. So this is a nonfiction account of his trek, not far from where you and I and our kids went in the foothills of the Himalaya, except he was closer to the bigger mountains, in the bigger mountains. And he went trekking with this biologist named George Schaller, who's a very famous wildlife conservation naturalist guy. And George was on a mission to find and track and study the snow leopard, which is a very elusive cat, big cat. I think bigger than the bobcat. And it's really hard to find. So the snow leopard becomes a metaphor for this book. And there's so much wisdom in that. And I learned a lot about how to interface with drugs in my life. And just from one of the lessons. And basically the idea was not to do it, just to step back. You want to experiment a little bit, that's interesting, be careful. But it was just a metaphor. He used a metaphor in the telling of in this snow leopard, where he was saying that, did I ever tell you this?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I know what you're going to say, but I love this. I thought about this a lot.
So powerful. It again, I grew up in a culture where a lot of kids, a lot of my friends, close friends, were doing a lot of drugs. And this really kept me on the path that I am on today, which is I don't need that stuff. I'm already really kind of zoned out in a good way. I don't want to be dependent on it. A little experimentation, sure. But his thesis was that you can come to a lake, and at the bottom of it's kind of a deep lake, you can come to the lake, and the bottom of the lake is where the wisdom is. True, deep, forever knowledge. Except it's at the bottom of the lake. How are you going to get to the bottom of the lake? So path one is you could show up with, let's say, 7, I'm making this part up, but something like you could show up with a bunch of boxes of dynamite. And you could set them up in different places and like stand back, and then you could light that and it's a big explosion. And then you could do, the water goes flying and stuff and dissolves and disappears into the atmosphere, and then you could just walk down the slope of where the waters in this lake were. And guess what? There is the wisdom there. It is there. The only problem is there's a lot of collateral damage from the dynamite.
Right.
He said there's another approach. Path B, call it. And that is every morning, like you wake up really early.
Right.
And you got in your hand, you've got this like a little bucket.
Right.
Like a kid's bucket that you'd see a kid playing with on the beach with their parents. And you're holding this little bucket, and you bend down and you scoop up some water in the little bucket, and you hold the little handle, and then you walk away. Next morning, early in the morning, wake up early in the morning, come down with that bucket, and you take another scoop. And each day, you come to this lake, and you just take a little bit of the water, and eventually you'll get to that same wisdom with less collateral damage.
And the wisdom may be in the act of just going to the lake every day.
I don't know if he said that,
but
that's why you should be writing. We're going to create a new book. I'll help you write it, or you help me write it. It's called Snow Leopard 2 by Eric Mering, and it'll have a rock opera embedded in it. So that was Peter Matheson. In terms of Paul Thoreau, a book that had a profound influence on me is called the Mosquito Coast, which also made into a movie. But just talking about the book, there's this fictional character who takes his family into the jungle, and he's railing against all the ills of Western civilization and all the materialism. He's a super smart guy. And he takes his family down to Central America and we're going to create our own society and we're going to do this. And it's like, it really resonated with me, because I was like, oh yeah, there are all these problems. And yes, we should go into the jungle and do things more naturally. And this main character, Ali Fox, he starts getting a little out there. Maybe he's a little out there to start with, and he keeps going out there and he loses it.
Right.
And the byline of the story is, how far should a man go to follow his dreams? Ali Fox went to the Mosquito Coast. He went too far. And it really upset me, because I really kind of related to this kooky guy going out to the jungle with his family. Like, I want to be this guy. And then he goes insane and things get really bad. And I thought, wow, thank you, Paul Theroux.
Right.
It was just,
I didn't read it. I remember seeing the movie. I remember it's Harrison Ford, right? And I remember him he had some ice wrapped in burlap, and they're trying to run it to this up the mountain to show some villagers ice or something, and then they get there and it's all the hubris, right? Yeah, it's all melted, right? Wow.
It's a brilliant story, and Paul Theroux's got a lot of other books about travel.
I read a couple of those.
The Great Railway Bazaar, and a bunch of other books, and those are titillating. They're kind of a little controversial. He can get a little sassy. Very insightful. Kind of, he's got his Paul Theroux attitude.
Everything. It's funny. It's fun having a book talk like this, because it's like everything you say leads me thinking about it. I'm hearing you, and I'm thinking about all these books. I'm thinking of Amitav Ghosh, the wonderful Indian writer. I'm thinking of some of the stuff you were just saying was making me think of, in the past, say 20 years, the two most epic, those books that try to give you a big human perspective books. One being Guns, Germs, and Steel.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Thank you for mentioning that was life-changing.
Life-changing book.
Life-changing book.
And his other one, which is, what's his...
Third Chimpanzee.
No, sorry, what's the other one?
Jared Diamond?
Yes, Jared Diamond's the other one about basically human extinction. He talks about Easter Island and what happened on Easter Island. How those great statues that are on Easter Island had to basically eat all the wildlife to get the power to roll those big stone statues all over the place, and so they went extinct.
They went extinct,
right?
Yeah,
it's what a crazy book. The other one, though, I have to say that I read recently is *Sapiens*. Have you read *Sapiens* yet?
No.
That's a must for you.
Yeah.
I think it's Yuval Noah Harari. I don't want to mispronounce his name. Epic read. Epic.
I love it. Speaking of Easter Island, I just thought of a series of books that totally changed my life. The books by Thor Heyerdahl. He's this guy from Scandinavia who got this idea about the movement of ancient peoples. How did the Americas get populated, that sort of thing. And so he decided to try to prove how people could have moved from the continents. So he went on expeditions across oceans in papyrus reed rafts. That was the Ra 1, Ra 2, and then Kon-Tiki.
Wow.
Going across he was going, let's see if I can remember this. He went from South America, I think. Was it Ecuador? I think it was off the coast of Ecuador. And sailed in a balsa. It was a made of logs, locally sourced logs, and they just sat and we put up a little sail and they just sat on it and went across the Pacific Ocean. Yeah, it's like, how is Polynesia populated? And so there's a lot of different theories about it. It turns out scientifically, I think Thor was wrong. Mm-hmm. But what gumption?
Right.
What gumption? It reminded me of maybe that book by Robert Manry, Tinkerbell, which we started off talking about.
Right.
Here's a guy who said, I've got an idea.
Right.
Now I'm going to risk my life and go across an ocean, get a bunch of guys, and got one person from each country, like different parts of the world. We got a Mexican guy, we got a U.S. guy, we got, it's just, it so captured my imagination.
That was taking me to, God, it's funny. It's like so many different directions. All these, it's so gorgeous. I love autobiographies, and I'm like, John Lennon's autobiography, or no, I love biographies, I should say. A story of John Lennon's life, amazing to me. The story of Satchmo, of Louis Armstrong, incredible. I love reading musicians' biographies. That always kind of blows my mind, to read what these musicians' lives were.
I read an interesting biography by William Shirer, and it's called Gandhi.
Oh, wow.
Of course, William Shirer hung out with Gandhi.
Yes.
I mean, they knew each other. Of course, this is the same William Shirer who wrote The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. So he wrote about the dark side and the light side, Gandhi and Hitler. And I remember running into William Shirer once in Western Massachusetts. Wow. And I was being interviewed by somebody, and I was bicycling across the United States and with a Siberian Husky puppy. So the journalist asked me, hey, I'm just curious, you have any books with you? And I said, yeah, I'm reading this great book by William Shirer. It's called, and she said, William Shirer, he's a good friend of mine. He lives down the road. We'd like to meet him. And I'm like, oh, you're joshing me. She says, no, I'm quite serious. And so she said, he'll be tickled to hear your story. And so I knocked on this door.
Oh my God.
And I had the little husky puppy, and I don't think I went to the door. I tied her up by a tree or something, gave her a bone and a bowl of water. And I knocked on this door, and this guy comes out and says, hello, how can I help you? And I guess the part I want to impart to him was, I'm really important, and I'm going to take some of your time now. It's completely embarrassing now. So sorry I did this. But I just said, hi, Mr. Shirer. I just want to say I'm bicycling across the country with and I'm reading your book, and I wanted to say, I'm curious about your view about, the ultimate evil and the ultimate good, or at least as I see it. But it turns out he didn't have time to talk, because he said to me, thank you. I'm a little busy now. I'm packing because I'm going to Russia I'm on a lecture tour. And I said, you know what I said to him? I said, okay, thank you. And I walked away. But fascinating.
Got a story from it.
I got a little story out of it. But those biographies were fascinating.
I love reading about I love reading about great people's lives.
What books about China? And have you come across any Tibetan Book of the Dead? Of course, that's not China, is it?
I read that book about the Cultural Revolution. What else have I read about China?
Have you read Lao Tzu?
No.
Oh my gosh. Obi-Wan Kenobi, move over.
Oh, really?
This is the real thing. I mean, all respect to George Lucas and Sir Alec Guinness, but Lao Tzu was this Chinese philosopher, poet, and he would, I don't know, get a little bit drunk and write these beautiful. I studied Chinese literature. Oh my gosh!
Wow,
it's like all the wisdom of the East.
Wow,
but without the culty stuff. The culty stuff for me came later.
Wow. I've done a lot of war reading. I've always been very interested in war, probably because of my family's connection to everyone has connection with World War II. Their family, I've almost every family,
sure,
sure. And so, my grandfather who fought in World War II was a flying ace in World War II. It's got me interested in just reading about World War II. And Liz's family's, her grandparents fled or left Germany in 1934 as Jews. Kind of got out there on the early side.
Wow.
Thank goodness. And so I'm always interested by, in reading about that era. So I've done a lot of World War II and World War I reading. I'm fascinated by that stuff. Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, obviously, and then big histories of the war, more focused history of the war, history of the Holocaust. A lot of reading about that. I find that stuff very. The stories are endless, and they go. There's no, you can't reach an end of how deep they can get, And I just read "The Yellowbird Sings," a story of a Holocaust story, a Holocaust era story, and I think reading sometimes is just an effort to try to understand the non-comprehensible.
Yeah. Sure.
And
sure.
And I read an account not too long ago about a Jew who basically worked in the camps, at Auschwitz.
Wow.
And survived. Wow. But he worked, and he wrote an account of his, just heart-wrenching.
My God.
So trying to understand the stuff that you can't comprehend, but at least people's accounts. And there's Elie Wiesel also, those kind of accounts
I just wanted to mention this amazing book called West with the Night by Beryl Markham. About a woman, you're talking about your family members and flying ace. What'd you say, your granddad?
Grandfather, yeah.
Your grandfather. Beryl Markham was a pilot living in Africa. Only white woman for like 100 miles, and she'd fly, and it's just about her adventures there, living with the Maasai. Real eye-opener to like understanding another culture and just seeing things from a different point of view. It's like jumping into cultural anthropology.
It's kind of what I'm feeling right now is also this kind of, wow, I can't even, there's so many books I haven't even started to, there's something I haven't talked about, or ones that I can't remember. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to go look at my shelf and be like, oh, in that book, and that.
There's one book, it's on the edge of my mind. Maybe you can help me remember it. It's not Paul Thoreau, but it's by a friend of his. And he wrote a book, this guy is an amazing traveler. Great travel writer, and one of his books called In Patagonia.
Yes, right.
And then there's another book he wrote, which is one of my favorite books of all time. And I wrote, and I can't remember the name of it, and I wrote to Paul Thoreau.
Bruce Chatwin?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
It was Bruce Chatwin and his...
The songlines.
Yes.
I have that at my bedside. That's another one I keep waiting to read.
I love that book, and I remember writing to Paul Thoreau saying, "Dear Mr. Thoreau," Paul Thoreau responded saying about the question of whether that was fiction or nonfiction. He said, well, knowing Bruce, it was a little of each.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. There's those books where I guess put books into categories and genres. Like, is this true or is it not true? I think there's been a lot of books through history where it's, I don't know, it's a mix. I mean, certainly Don Quixote. Is it true or is it not true? There's plenty of it's real, plenty of it's not. What do you categorize it as? That's it's interesting that a modern sensibility demands to know, is it true or is it not true? Well, how do you categorize it? It has to be either fiction or nonfiction. And what's the category for books that are all of those things?
Something I don't get, and that is, how is it that people can say to you, I'm bored?
Tell me about it.
I mean, we just mentioned a small number of interesting to us books, and there's literally millions more. How could you be bored?
Absolutely.
When there's not enough time to read one tiny, tiny sliver?
I had a problem with going to the library. I had to stop because I would just check out all these books and not be able to get to get to one of them, and then get all these library finds because I get so excited by the books, and
I read all the Harry Potter books.
I have not done that.
Several times. I've read each one several times.
I have not read. I unfortunately have not. My kids have.
And then somebody told me that was fiction.
Oh, really? Have you read James Baldwin? I read him recently. Amazing. I
may have.
Yeah, James Baldwin, Another Country. One of those authors you start reading and you're like, wow, they're so... The writing is so right on the ground. Like you don't... It's just so... It so captures feeling and you feel like you're there, somehow really on the ground. I can't know how to describe it, but really struck me. I'm I don't know 100 pages into Anna Karenina right now, and reading books but I put it on pause to read this other huge one we're reading for the next podcast, the 40 Days of Musa Dog. But I was struck by reading Anna Karenina that and you read something from another time before films, the authors describe things almost like you're watching a movie. Like they're very just like you can really see things in the book in a different way. And the authors were just kind of like painters of a different era before photography, painted in a certain way, could try to capture something. And final great book. Go ahead. Final great book.
Final great book. On the count of 3.
1,
2, 1 and a half. The greatest book ever. I'm doing this so I can think while I'm talking.
The greatest book ever?
The greatest book ever is, it has a cover on it. It's got pages. It's,
man.
Oh, I know what it is. It's The Odyssey by Homer.
Oh, great one.
Yeah.
I'll give you The Milagro Beanfield War.
I never read that. I knew it was made into a movie.
Such a great book. Oh my gosh.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Beautiful, incredible book. Which makes me think of the Poisonwood Bible.
Never read it.
No.
Never
gosh.
read it.
Oh, epic.
Never read it.
The Reality Illusion. Did you ever read that?
No.
Oh my gosh.
Never read that one.
Oh my gosh. So many books.
Oh my God. I can't believe that we never discussed this one yet. Thank you for asking.
Your time is running out. The ticker's
catwalk.
going.
In the count of 3. 1, 2. I'll give you a hint.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of how to give you a hint. Because it's not so much an auditory book. At least for me, it wasn't.
The Road Less Traveled. Another great one. Ooh, that was a wonderful read.
Was that by Pecker?
Again, we are in the G rating.
G string, yeah, sorry. No, I'm sorry. We're losing customers as we speak. How am I going to pay my bills? So wait a minute. It's called It's called Winnie the Pooh.
Oh, yeah.
The greatest story ever told.
Yes. Yes.
About Pooh Bear. Right?
Yeah. It's wonderful.
It's all about being. That's what Pooh is. He's like, he is just is, and everyone else is like, Eeyore's got these emotional issues, and Rabbit is a bit pushy and stuff, and Piglet has fear of everything. I think Christopher Robin is the narrator, but I don't know about Owl, maybe sort of the erudite academic cathedral of learning, and Pooh just is. Pooh just takes, oh my gosh, there's such a beautiful lesson there. Pooh just lets things come, and like, I'm here in the day, and there's bees, and there's a beautiful cloud, and it's just each thing that comes by, that becomes the lesson and the experience. There's nothing to do, just to be. It's the ultimate Lao Tzu. It's the ultimate Zen. It's the ultimate acceptance of who one is and loving that. You can't get a better book than Winnie the Pooh. Captcha.
Yeah.
And it's a way to know that you're not a bot. You're not some Russian
Correct.
bot.
Right.
And it's so that, identify the buses in each of these frames.
Right.
And you got to click which one's
right.
the bus. Mr. Peach is in, he's laughing. Each time you do a captcha,
Yeah.
and you're forced to do that, like, okay, which one is the mountains in? And like, maybe there's like a little mountain way in the distance. Like, I don't want to be like acting like I know, like I'm drunk. So, there's some stress when you do a captcha for some of them, because the questions they ask, like, where do you see the Tabasco sauce with a snippet of someone's armpit hair or something like, okay, I'm looking at that. Could be an armpit hair right there, but maybe not. And so it's really stressful. Mr. Peach is laughing all the way to the supermarket.
Really?
Yes.
In 140 characters or less.
Or less.
Or less.
Yes, it's incredible. So he invented the captcha, because it's not called capture. You see?
Brilliant. So he invented that?
He invented it, and he's in each frame. And so each time you are in a captcha, it gets more and more sophisticated, because life is like that. Like, you have to choose which one you're in right now, and that leads to your next thought. And if you click on the wrong thing, then you end up like marrying the wrong person, and like going massively in debt. I mean, it's not just as an internet security app.
Got it. Wow. So that's
do you understand that?
Kind of. I mean,
could you explain it to me?
So,
I'm not sure I get it.
Well, I mean,
okay, that's interesting.
Like, if you think about James and the Giant Peach,
I think about that all the time.
Right?
Yeah.
Then maybe there was actually way more significance in the rolling down the hill part of than we thought about. That it all comes back to like Google's trying to figure out
way more
what kind of who you are and what you like, and to sell you.
What if you don't like anything? This is the hardest part of being in the internet generation.
Oh no!
Because like, if you think of Facebook and you think of Instagram, and you think of Google and you think of Twitter, you have to like all these things. What if you don't like things? You're like left out. It's like way more. You're saying way more. Waymo.
Lamo. LMAO.
LMAO, which is totally lame-o.
Limo.
You put the lame in the coconut and lame it. It's just, what if you don't like?
Click on page 3.
Page 3.
Right. What if you don't like, anything about the previous tweet, and 100,000 other people did, and then all of a sudden you've got people lining up to read your tome, and it's only 140 pages, 140 characters, or 140 peaches, or 140.
And what if what you just said in the last, I don't know, let's say minute or two,
I forgot,
was actually the space between one of Trump's next tweets, and let's say he actually was allowed to tweet.
Wow.
And this was like the pregnant pause before the next taking over the democratic reins of a nation that's been around, the oldest democracy for, since whenever. And everything you just said was actually right before his next harangue.
Right. Well, he's got a lot of reading to do. He's got some catching up to do on the reading front.
He needs to captcha, which takes us, right?
What's your favorite book, Mr. Trump? All of them.
I like all the books. Mr. Trump. All right, let's do this. Mr. Trump. Okay, let me try to act like Dan Rather or Tom Brokaw. My eyebrows furrowed. Mr. Trump. What is your capital?
Blue.
No, red. What is the capital of Hexagamenia? What is the penguin? Mr. Trump, what is
the
what is the precept upon which the nation that you have served founded? Greed? Me? Did Trump exist before he was born? I'm talking about Donald, not Fred.
Is the universe infinite?
Does macadamia have nuts?
Macadamia.
Yes, the Cathedral of Burning.
Macadamia. Academia. I see.
Yes, it's done on a Mac.
Macadamia.
Look.
Academia.
Macadamia.
I see.
Yes.
You always have this way of weaving it back to the beginning.
Yes.
Ruining.
Yes.
Weaving it back to the beginning. To get my brain confused.
No.
You'd be gaslighting right now, right? Because the macadamia actually was a reference.
I am.
To
Mark, gaslighting, Elliot, Laxer. At your
so that's your second name? Macadamia actually means academia, which is a way of trying to make me feel like I didn't understand all that I learned in college or when I made that collage in college. We don't want to go there.
Okay. I think we need to cancel everything we've ever said.
And then we need to cry about it.
Okay. What does it mean to cancel canceling?
Cancel canceling?
Like all this canceling, can we just cancel that?
Yes.
What does it mean to cancel something? So in other words, let's say you don't like something. Could you say, I don't like it? Why does that become canceling?
Because that, I don't know.
Why can't you just say, I don't like it? And what's the difference between canceling and I don't like it?
Well, it has to go in 140 characters or less.
Okay.
But in 140 characters or like, I'd say the difference is the difference between a peach pie and a manure pie that's sitting out on the field. One you can slice and dice. You what?
I love those.
You love pies?
No, manure pies.
Manure pies. Actually, they make great fires. That's what's kind of the thing about, if you were to...
I feel like it's my duty.
I was once in a camel trek on the desert. And
that's really funny. Could you say that again?
And the bonfire we made was all out of camel dung.
Was it?
Yeah.
That wasn't the bonfires of vanities, was it?
It was brilliant. It was like... That's how you... Does Puppy need to go out? Is that what that is?
No, I don't know. Puppy just wants attention.
Puppy wants
I hope she's okay.
We made, the bonfire was camel dung, and it was brilliant. And the food we cooked with camel dung. And it kind of took me back to You know, like those great books that you read when you finish them, like Let's Go Europe, 1992. I put on a bonfire after I
Did you?
traveled around Europe. With
Actually,
it,
I didn't
with a
read that
picture.
one.
Yeah.
I read Let's Go Urine. So I never got to Europe. So that's actually, now I realize is a lot I've been missing.
Right.
So like if you think about like France and England, I know England's not supposed to be Europe, but whatever. Like take a left turn on Brexit or something. And then like Germany and Spain and all these cool, you know, Italy and Belgium and wherever, Rotterdam and stuff. I never went because I thought it said, let's go to urine. Which I thought were mountains in like Western Soviet Republic or something. The
no.
urine. It turns out it was Urals.
No.
But
right.
I urinals and stuff. But no shit. It's like I went there to the urinals and I was trekking there.
Oh, wow.
And I never got to see Europe. So there's so much of my education that just doesn't.
Sweet puppy.
Imagine like one day waking up and you're like a rabbit.
That has happened, actually.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
And
I
do tell.
Well, if it was that easy to explain, I'd be a millionaire. Everyone would
Are
want
you?
Yeah.
How easy is it?
In bunny tokens, I am, but you know, it was great. It was very, you know, hoppy kind of. And I'm not saying IPA. I'm not talking IPAs. No. Very hoppy kind of existence, and you know, it lasted a short while until my other life beckoned. And
Speaking of which, I just realized something.
Yes.
I just had a realization.
yes, that's good. Congratulations, you got a trophy. It's a big golden trophy.
I've always wanted a big golden trophy.
Well, your day has been made. Keep reading books. 10 more books, and you'll get. I'll give you a
Spinach in the Park,
spinach in the park.
which is an award.
Yes. No broccoli, though. I know how you feel about broccoli. So,
I
10
think-
more books, and you get a special prize.
Feelings mutual.
Yeah.
Broccoli doesn't like me
10
either.
more books, and you'll get a smooth. I'll let you go to the smoothie store. You can choose your smoothie. Any smoothie.
Schmooze your stoogie.
Schmooze you lose.
Schmooze your doogie. Have you ever schmoozed your doogie? Let me tell you, the first few seconds is really. Anyway, it's like nothing you've ever, you know.
Okay, this is a G-rated podcast, or maybe it's not G-rated, but you know, easy there.
It's
Easy.
like the guitar; it's got that G string thing.
Well, easy.
Okay.
You schmooze, you
Schmooze, you lose.
booze.
You booze. So here's the thing: this is the thing you get by listening to Mr. Peach. All the ancient wisdom, or the wisdom of the ancients, or any way you want to parse that,
Right.
of mysticism,
Yes.
can be explained with this one sentence.
Go. Uh-oh, did the wise man just leave?
All of mysticism seems to be trying to leave who you are. All the people who are trying to be mystics, it turns out, Eric,
Yes.
they're not very happy people.
Oh,
Because they're all trying to be like crows or like turn into other forms of consciousness. Because they all have crappy lives. Like me. Like
no.
I'm
Oh,
always
they.
No, seriously, listen. That things could be better. Listen, it's rough.